So my presentation is the following. It's about TRIZ. So excuse me, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So my presentation about TRIZ forecast of the development of research in optical microresonators, and I will tell about optical microresonators. We already heard several presentations. One was by Jānis Alnis, the other was by Jelena Ashkina, and now by Arseny Sorokin. And then I will tell about overview of this theory of inventive problem solving and some applications of TRIZ for optical microresonator development. And overview of this research in optical microresonators. At first, in our laboratory of quantum optics, which is led by Jānis Alnis. In recent years, we are realizing 3 projects. At first, in the first project, we wanted to get these microresonators to model them. The second project was about exploration of sensor capabilities of these resonators. And this last project is about the generation of frequency comb out of these resonators and application of this comb in telecommunications. And so this experience in working with these topics made the necessity to think how we can proceed further, in which directions, and where could we find some advices for further development. And these main concepts of optical microresonators, there is some resonances of them, which can you see here. For example, if there is a Ball resonator and the light travels by the perimeter, if the integer number of wavelengths is in this optical path, then the resonance condition is formed. And these resonances we see in this graph. For example, this is a transmitted light. And you see the position of this resonance depends on radius and refraction index. And resonance are described by positions and the width of this resonance. And when some parameters of the systems change, the resonance positions also can change. For example, if the radius is changing or refraction index is changing, then resonance positions moves, and therefore a sensor can be obtained. And our laboratory worked on this and described the temperature sensor, humidity sensor, wavelength sensor. And as I already said, the task would be to understand where we have to develop further. And if we have analyzed broad literature of microresonators, we see that various directions of microresonator research has been already tested. And they are very popular. For example, you see these resonators on first pages of top journals like Nature, Science, and Nature Photonics. And in the literature, there is already various forms of resonators have been tested, like ball resonators, ring resonators, disc resonators, toroid resonators, and so on. Various materials of resonators have been tested, and there were the various coupling schemes, how to introduce light into resonator, like prism, light tapered fiber, like part of the fiber or the end of the fiber. And there are some new schemes appearing that we can introduce light in the resonator if we put 2 resonators at the end of the fiber. And there's also to introduce resonant frequencies by space coupling of the resonator. And here is an interesting picture about new way what the geometry of the resonator can be. It's called spiral resonator. And then in the research, they already analyzed 1 resonator, 2 resonators, 3 resonators, even arrays of resonators. And there are various applications that have been already explored. They can be used as frequency filters, temperature sensors, humidity sensors, and if light intensity is increased, which is introduced to the resonator, then the resonators can show nonlinear effects and frequency combs can be generated. And this frequency combs can be used also for neural network simulations. So these are various directions has been used so far. And now we switch to this topic about this theory for inventive problem solving, what it is about and what can it provide for our needs. So this theory was developed by Genrikh Anshul in Azerbaijan. At the time it was Soviet Union, and his theories and ideas became very popular. His idea was to analyze patterns and to find how these developments could be found, and he proposed some algorithms, some guidelines how to develop new ideas and how to develop these solutions. And he tried to give advices how to develop ideas that can be patentable. And in 1980s was the peak of this movement. In Soviet Union, there was at least 500 active groups who studied this theory under the leadership of Altshuler. And for example, the last version, what was prepared for algorithm for inventive problem solving, was developed in 1985, and then they were used. And after, in 1990s, TRIZ experts went to Western world, in Europe, United States, and Korea, and brought this knowledge of the TRIZ. And now the TRIZ is worldwide known theory. There are seminars about this, and there is even international TRIZ association, European TRIZ associations. They make conferences and teaching on this method. So what are the main ideas? The idea is that we can analyze former development of technologies and can derive some laws for this development that can be applied for the future development of the technology. There's a concept, was the concept of contradiction. For example, if we want to improve one parameter of the system, but the other parameter of the system then becomes worse, then this contradictions appears. And then our task is to focus on this contradiction to find how to overcome it. And when we overcome it, we develop a new system. And additional idea was that we can analyze and to develop new ideas and to solve problems in a logical method. And they give various advices, and it is somehow opposely to this idea that creativity is uncatchable and it's hard to make it in logical steps. And therefore the books that were made for TRIZ had titles, for example, creativity as an exact science. Typical creativity is not an exact science, but they wanted to make it like exact science with some rules. For example, and then they wrote, for example, inspiration on demand. A typical inspiration comes and goes, but they said that if they use these principles, they can find some good solutions. And there are various tools that can be used. For example, algorithm for inventive problem solving. There are about 30 steps that can be used just to solve one contradiction. Then there was a system of 76 standards, 7 laws of system development, database of physical, chemical, and geometrical effects. They analyzed the patterns and derived what kind of physical effects was to use to do some technological trick. And they made some tables where we can find what kind of physical effects can be used, for example, to stabilize temperature. Then there was other tools like 39 parameters technical systems, 40 principles to eliminate technical contradictions. And there was contradiction matrix, there was S-curve analysis, and additional tools like morphological box, hierarchy of the system, functional models, trends of developments, and so others. And these are the titles that you can search in the literature and find some ideas. And what is a bit tricky about the use of all these advices, that besides these advices, we need expertise in the specific field. And for example, if some experts like a researcher are trying to find new solutions, and then they got good advice, then they can find this proper solution. But these advices, pure advices of TRIZ, have a lack of knowledge in the specific field, and therefore it's hard to use them. And so some advices what are inside this TRIZ technology that can be used in the development of microresonators. For example, one of the devices is to use available resources that is available in the system. And the idea is that at first systems are created and they try to use some external resources. But when we understand and find some internal resources, then these systems become more efficient and more ideal. For example, we want to melt optical microresonators, and there are already optical fibers that can be used as materials for these microresonators. Then there is a fiber welder that typically is not used for microresonator melting, but we can use it to melt these resonators. Then the resonators can be kept in laboratory containers like these, which we can find in laboratory. So resonator have problems that external dust and humidity attach to it, and the quality factor of the resonator decreases, and therefore it has to be kept from this external environment. And these standard laboratory containers can be used to do it. Then we can use silica gels to remove moisture from the external environment, and when we can put these resonators in these containers and to put these silica gel balls, and then the system is increased. And so this is like a general advice, and those who are experts in this field, those can use it. That they have to find what kind of resources are in this technical system, and then to explore them. The other advice is to use internal effects of materials. And this guideline is that system can be developed by using internal resources of elements of the system, for example, their physical properties. And for example, resonators is made of dielectric material that has ultra-striction properties, and therefore can be explored as such. So in general, when resonators are used, they are not using this property of the resonator, but this is direction for exploration of this effect and for gaining new effects. Then advice is for trimming, to reducing some parts of this resonator systems so that the system becomes more simple. For example, if you use a prism, we introduce laser light into prisms, and through the prism we can introduce light into the resonator, and then the light travels outside the prism. If we want to remove the prism, only keep this ray of the laser, then we can use tapered fiber, and we can say the system is more simple because we reduce this specific part in the system. And there are also new developments that they want to reduce this even tapered fiber. They made balls on the top of optical fiber, and some resonances are observed there. There is additional advice, the synchronization of parameters. For example, the guideline is a system can be developed by synchronization of the parameters with among themselves or with significant external objects. So I will check my time. Yes. For example, we have to synchronize refraction index of prism and resonator. We can synchronize the wavelengths of the system with requirements of the industry. For example, the wavelengths of 1.5 micrometers for telecommunications. And we can synchronize the material and shape of the resonator to fit silicon photonics. And so to make them more usable for chip production. Another direction is to development in a super system. This means that systems can be developed by combining it with similar or other systems, and together they form super systems. And typical research currently that we are observing, for example, frequency combs, we are using one resonator. And still there are a possibility to use several resonators. Maybe there are some advantages. And in literature, there appeared that resonators can be used as arrays of resonators to make some novel results and to observe novel effects. And to develop in the microresonators in some super systems, it also means that we use microresonators as part of some larger systems. For example, we use it for sensing applications like temperature, humidity, biosensing, and so on. There is also a large branch for the development to use microresonators in various applications. Then another advice is dynamization, that typical parameters of the system are static, but we can change it in time. For example, in microresonators, we can change their temperature, and therefore we can tune these frequencies. And those who made, for example, frequency combs of the resonators, they introduce one laser light in the system and then observe this frequency comb. Maybe there can be used as another laser that heats the resonator and therefore can switch these resonances to better match these conditions for frequency comb generation. And so this is direction for the development. Another advice for the development is expansion over morphological matrix. It means that various parameters of the system can be changed. And we already have seen in previous research that others have reported that there were various materials of resonators were used, various geometries of resonators were used, various additional effects were used on microresonators. For example, acoustic waves, machine learning. We can use various wavelengths of resonators and various intensities of lasers. And for example, this idea of frequency comb generation on microresonators appeared later than initial research on these resonators. Maybe because they didn't find that they can try to change the intensity of laser and then to observe some new effects. But if, for example, 15 years ago, someone could use this advice and to understand that even the intensity of laser can be changed, they could have this hypothesis: what would happen if the intensity of laser light increases or becomes large? And then they could find that nonlinear effects start to work and this frequency comb can be generated. Another advice can be to use standards that has been prepared in TRIZ, and there are some ideas of 76 standards that can be used. For example, the standard 113 says that if you want to increase the performance of the system, some additives can be used. And we can say that for biosensing, resonators are covered by a sensitive layer that is sensitive to some specific biomolecules, and therefore microresonators becomes as sensors for biomolecules. We can say that standard 113 already gave this idea that we have to put some additive, but maybe those who already made this this novelty, they didn't knew about this standard. But the ideas of these standards is that if we start new system and we don't know how to develop, this gives some guidelines for further development. And then there are additional tools for TRIZ development. Here are some links. These ideas were developed by, as I said, in Soviet Union. They're written in Russian and can be acceptable via these links. And there are some translations in English, but they are not very good and not enough systematic. And for example, Western consultants mainly are using only this part of the TRIZ, like 39 parameters technical system and contradiction matrix, to get some solutions. And in Coursera, there is also a new lecture course, Creative Thinking, Technologies and Tools for Success, which is made by Imperial College London, and it's accessible freely. And if you're interested more in these themes, you can get some ideas about TRIZ and its application from this lecture course. And so my conclusion is that I showed that overview of the research of microresonators and TRIZ, and showed that in TRIZ there were various guidelines, and former development of microresonators shows that they already used these principles and made novel systems. And the advantage could be if we could apply these advices, for example, 15 or 20 years ago, we could also find new solutions and to prepare a good publication prior to those which were prepared. And the advantage is that these tools can be used to advance the field of optical microresonators. And for my opinion, there are various tools that are perspective for further development of microresonator, like dynamization, that we don't use static resonators, but we somehow attune their parameters. We can use trimming to make the system more simple and more usable, and we can use it by joining with other systems. So thank you for your attention, and are there any questions?
I have a question, Sune Svanberg here.
Yes, please.
I have a question.
Yes, so Sune Svanberg can start. And then
thank you, Aigars, for excellent report.
Okay.
Yes,
but can we start with a comment of Sune Svanberg and then with Petros Marchenko?
Well,
yes.
You know, okay. Whatever. Whoever starts, it doesn't matter. But thanks a lot, Aigars, for a very excellent and very intriguing talk. I must confess I wasn't aware of the concept of TRIZ, and well, it's worth a lot of thinking, I guess. And what comes to mind is, of course, whether for the future, with a strong development of artificial intelligence, all our problems can be solved by supercomputers and so on. So I would like you to speculate on that. From my own experience, I found that, you know, getting ideas and getting forward frequently can come from combining experience from different research fields. Sometimes I have the feeling that in physics or in nature, there are not so many really different things. There might be 10 different things, and they go under different names in different contexts, and people go to different conferences and so on. But, you know, basic things about that are the same, and they are processed in different ways. What do you think about this? Can artificial intelligence, for instance, help to combine things to help, you know, outperform people being creative, giving Nobel Prizes to new computer programs rather than to individual scientists and so on? This is a long shot for sure.
So in this TRIZ development, one direction is to use them as this artificial intelligence. For example, they could use the pattern database and to derive some concepts and to find new solutions. And but still, in the current application of this TRIZ, there's always this challenge that there are basic advices for the development, but they are missing some specific steps that only human can use. And therefore, creator of this system also said that we have to combine TRIZ with standard thinking, and then it works. But if we use just these formulas for developing new ideas, they are like not enough good. And so my current experience with the TRIZ for the last 10 years was that from one side, I want to get new ideas from these principles, but then they give, for example, 100 directions, and there is hard to reach it, and therefore it's not so easy. But if some researcher can pick some of ideas and get good results, they are very useful.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you. So Petros Mertenko, you had a question.
Thank you once again for excellent report in history of TRIZ. But I have very simple and very complicated simultaneously question. How many patents did you prepare during last 5 years?
So I didn't prepare patents. We recruited one TRIZ master, Alexander Narbut, and we are preparing one patent for these microresonators, but that is in process, and that is a problem with which also we are facing with TRIZ, that TRIZ at some moment gives good advices, but to get real some patents, it's very complicated, and therefore those who don't know about TRIZ, but they try another methods, they can be more successful. So it's a very tricky question.
You see, I see TRIZ as a big hammer, but it has two nails if you have a hammer. This is one question, and one question here. There is one firm with developed TRIZ in Boston, inventionmachine.com. Did you contact with them?
So I didn't contact it with them. There are various teams, and for example, in there are this TRIZ master, one who came from Latvia. It was Isaac Buchman. He also went to Boston, and he's a TRIZ master, and he made some presentation, also participated in his presentations, and he works as advisor to companies worldwide. And there are some other companies in Boston. This is also headed by the TRIZ master, and they also like putting a service companies worldwide. And there may be in a world, maybe there are 5 strong such companies, maybe 30 not so strong, but they are still doing. And I participated in the European Association of TRIZ and of their conferences, and these advisors still say that this consulting with TRIZ with companies is very tricky, that from one side it's hard to give good advices, from the other side that if they go to the company and quickly show some good solution, then director said to his team, research team, why you didn't find this solution already 5 years ago? And therefore these research teams are not satisfied with these advices. And but this consulting is happening, and typically there are some not these leaders of TRIZ, everybody wants to develop their directions, and they are arguing one with each other, and they are not collaborating with each other, and so it's a very complicated thing, and so it's also a tricky, but I think these advices can be used and they're helpful.
Yes, thank you. But I would like to advise you to make active phase of TRIZ application in your laboratories, in Photonika-LV or in the university, because it's very, very useful instrument. Thank you.
Thank you. So Uldis, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, I had one question, very specific. Does TRIZ system includes Moore's law, what is used to predict the future in semiconductor industry, in IT technologies, and so? Moore's law is that number of transistors on microchip is doubling within 2 years. And so the speed of transistors is growing and price is going down, and so. And it's
So,
used.
yes, directly they are not using this law, but they, for example, say that if there is a tendency to minimize all these devices, so this tendency will continue forward. And there we have to find what is the minimizing factor for these devices. For example, the smallest device can be 1 atom, and so these devices can shrink to the value of several atoms, and such ideas. Okay, thank you for your useful questions. We have to proceed to the next presentation.